role up there that I figured out what UX actually was. And I guess eventually led me here to Finra. Most of my career has been around finance, and so Finra is definitely in that realm. So we're a financial regulator. Our whole mission is to protect investors. And so we do that in many different ways. What my group specifically works on is the external products that we produce. So a lot of the financial firms that we work with submit information to us so that we can actually understand what they're doing and making sure that basically they're all playing by the rules. So you'll see a couple of the designers from my team here, and you'll see a few of their portfolios as we go through here, and then you'll know why they work for us. So now let me share this. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Alrighty. Cool. So portfolio prep 101. Let's get into it. So before we go into the actual portfolio aspect of things, let's talk about what you actually are doing here. You're looking for a job, right? But I think a lot of times you get stuck focusing on the effort that's going to take to do the portfolio, worrying about what comes with it, like trying to define yourself really well, without really thinking about what you're looking for, right? And early on in your career, it may be a little bit hard to really understand what it is that you're looking for, but I'm sure that you've heard a little bit about the difference between agency life and corporate life. The idea of being a lone wolf, right? So the only designer on a team versus working with an entire group of other designers. So I would really recommend that at this point, before you start working on your portfolio, or maybe even before you start applying jobs, you take this into consideration. Because even though you're looking for probably your first job professionally, it's going to be really important for you to know what you're looking for and really hone in on that before you start developing your portfolio to really blend that all together. It's going to set the tone for what your goals are. And there's an exercise that you can do around this too. It's actually a more UX-based exercise that we use in some projects where you assign yourself basically $100 and you write down questions of like value of, is time, like work-life balance more important to you, or is camaraderie, right? Being around other people, the mission or the money? What's the thing that's really going to like for you has the most value? And then you assign monetary values to each one of the things to set priority. And so with that kind of $100 increment, it lets you really visualize a lot better what is most important to you and can help define more of what you're looking for. And then also with this, I would highly recommend treating this as a research project. Like if you don't know some of these things and you're not sure what it's all about, talk to people. Like the UX community is honestly out here to help. People all up and down rankings from across the organization, from like your Jared Spools and your Nielsen's and Normans, they're willing to talk to you. You'd be surprised how much just like a gesture, like asking somebody to help will actually help you in the long run, right? So myself included. All right, so moving on. So treating your portfolio as a project. It's kind of what I was talking about briefly here. We keep getting caught up in the idea of this is going to cost me my job, this is going to be really important, but we need to come back to what we've learned, right? What you know, what you've been taught over these times, and stop getting tangled in the weeds. So really define what your problem is, like who your audience is, right? If you've done the exercise from before that we were just talking about, you'll have a better idea of who you'll more than likely be talking to, what type of work they'll want to see, right? So for us, from a Finra perspective, we're more on the corporate side, right? So what I look for is like the more professional look and the people's work, but definitely some creativity, just because we're going through a digital transformation and we need to see people like be a little bit more innovative in the way they work. What's your goal in this? Obviously it's to get a job, right? But what type of job? What are you looking to get out of it? Are you trying to be not just at this job, but after that? Think about kind of how this will progress you. And then the message, call to action, right? So this is more around like how you're branding yourself, how you want people to flow through the application, or in this circumstance, it's actually your portfolio, right? And then make sure to organize the existing content that you have. Really get an idea of the information that you've gathered over the years. Decide what's important, what's not, what's trash at this point, right? I think as designers, we have to be very critical of ourselves and realize that at a certain point, like you just have to throw something away. It's just not worth it. And with that, you can identify gaps that are missing, right? Maybe there's like you've done 15 mobile projects, but haven't done a single web project. Maybe you should add something in that variety. Or maybe it's all just app like websites that all look the exact same and you need to add some variety around like an application or something around visualization, right? Show off just a little bit more. Step 2, once you do all that, don't keep it real, right? You're going to want to take your work that you've done, like you probably have a bunch of pictures from whiteboards that you've worked on and sticky notes and like all these drawings that you have probably on paper, or maybe you've tossed them, but make sure you clean up your work. A lot of these things don't present that well on the computer. So keep the information the same, but don't just like take a picture and slap it on there. You can tell it just feels lazy when people are doing that. And this is your time to shine, to show off your work and be proud of it. Explain your limitations in what you're doing, right? Be honest with what you weren't able to accomplish and what you would have wanted to accomplish if you were to do it again. But a key here is don't make up your work, right? We get a lot of information around this area. It's not that big of an area. So just to give you a story, what was it? About 6 months ago, we were hiring for 2 junior roles, right? And I got about 120 different resumes submitted for those 2 roles. And I saw a complete project, the entire team. There was 4 different people submit their resume directly for that role. So when I saw that 2 people were contradicting each other and saying that they were doing the same thing, for me, it was just a write-off, right? I didn't want to figure out who was lying, who was telling the truth. It wasn't worth the time. Somebody was being dishonest, and honestly, in the workplace, that's one of the biggest things that we're looking for. And then don't change your results to fit your hypothesis. That's not what it's about, right? We're not trying to prove that we're the smartest or we're always right, especially where you are today. Just prove that you're learning, right? That's really the goal, is to prove your understanding of UX as a concept and like the theories that go into it, and understanding the questions to ask, but also understanding how to learn from the mistakes that you've made in the past. And then it's time to show us what you got. So like I was saying earlier, there's definitely some variety that you should be showing in your work. Try to keep to like a style that makes sense for your job. Don't go crazy glitter, adding a bunch of different like colors for no reason just to keep things different. But think about mobile, think about applications, think about visualization, think about where we're going in the future, right? Actually take the time to sit and understand what companies are going to want and how you can provide for that. So I would say at least 3 projects. I know it's tough depending on where you are in your stage of your career, especially if you're still in school, maybe just beginning your UX practice, but really hone in on doing the work. There's plenty of organizations that need your help. Even within UMD, I know there's groups that are asking for support and looking for UX designers to come in and at least do the work, try it out. So try at least 3 projects. Then when you have at least 3, when a hiring manager or somebody that's maybe a recruiter is looking at your projects, they can find what they're looking for within your group. There's a better chance of it. But that's that. Also, don't go too overboard. If you just start putting everything on your portfolio, then it's like it just gets overwhelming, right? I don't know what to click, what to look at, what's newest. And so with that, make sure you're grouping things logically. If you have a bunch of logos, don't just like spread them around a website. Make sure to centralize. Like if you have graphic work that you want to show off your graphic work in a single location, or think about it logically. If like this goes with a branding project, right? Pull that all together. That goes into the whole idea of not everything should be a portfolio piece. I don't know about you, but I've definitely gone through yearly and tossed work, whether it's for my computer or physical that we've had to print out and do boards on. It finds its way to the trash can just because like you've done it, you've learned from it, but you have to be comfortable with throwing things away. It's just something that comes with being a designer. Like take the lessons that you can with it, but don't be afraid to move forward. Um, Variety of work, cover that, and then give users a window into the work. So this is really important. So with that variety, with the differentiation in the work that you're doing, when I click on one of the projects, I want to know what I'm about to see, right? With the case when I had like 120 people submit for two different options, right? Two different jobs. It was overwhelming, right? We need to hire two people very quickly. We're looking at a time frame of I needed to have them in within 3 weeks, and there's 120 different resumes, so I don't have the time to go through a portfolio and spend like more than 5 to 10 minutes looking at it, right? So that homepage, that hub where you see what the projects are, give me an idea of what I'm about to click into, right? And so if I can see this project is going to look similar to where I'm kind of envisioning the work for the designers is going to go, then I'm going to click on that one. If I have no idea what I'm clicking on, then it's kind of a guessing game, and you're throwing me for a loop. And when I land on something that sounds like a bank app, but it looks like a music app, like just not hitting the same mark, right? So give context clues on these. And then jumping into the actual portfolio projects themselves. One of the big things on here is that there's a sweet spot for how much information that you're actually providing, right? We want to key in on highlights around things and really hone in on like the details that make us understand that you get what the project was. You understood the goals from not just your perspective, or you didn't just make it up, but you thought about it from the perspective of potential users. You thought about it from the potential business thought process, right? What is the business goals in a scenario when you're working on something like this, right? So your goals should definitely signify what those are and let the reader know immediately what the project is in a very short, succinct way. Past that, your role in the project, right? If you're working on something like this with a group, explain how you benefited the group and what parts of it you took. Even if you were like partially a researcher, explain what you did there. Again, just like snippets, let us get into the details very quickly. And then defining your audience, etc. Same thing you would do in writing a project brief. Make sure you're having this here, and then defining kind of the flow that we're expecting as we go through your project. Yep, and then make sure you're showing your steps. Jumping in, showing somebody like what the beginning is, right? Like defining goals and everything, and then just showing a final product doesn't help us understand that you know what you're talking about. It feels like you could have just made a design up and not thought about the actual principles of design at all. Just like, I thought this looked pretty, and so I put it up here. And the visual side is one side, but if you're looking for a UX role, we're really looking for thought process more than anything. So by showing us really your steps, the pieces that get you to the result, the learnings that you got along the way, it helps take us on that journey as well. And really that's what we need. And obviously, what was the result? So if you got to the final stages of prototyping, if it's been built into an actual website and you can share it, please do. The more real something gets, the more attached to it we get. So which kind of leads us to the other thing, right? Issues that we have a lot of times. So in this general area, there's a lot of government work that happens. Finra is not a government organization, but just the same, a lot of the work that we do is not available to the public, right? It's something it's hidden behind certain doors, and therefore you can't show your work. It happens. I think majority of the people in this area will tell you that they have at least one project that they worked on that they can't share with you. There's ways to go around it. Make sure you talk to the organization before you do something like this, but you can ask them to share the work if it's password protected, right? And then you can share the password with the group that's going to be looking at your work. Research is in a similar boat. This happens pretty frequent where you can't actually show the details of research, but you have to get a little creative here, right? whether you can switch what you're talking about, maybe change the subject and redo the presentation of it to make it feel not related to the exact company that you were working with, but I'll show you a little bit more of what I mean. Peter, one of the designers on my team, did an amazing job of doing this that I highly recommend that you guys take a deeper look into later as well. Um, but even if it was just a school project, really think about how you can make it feel more real, but don't try to convince people that you worked at a place. We've had a few instances of that. And when you're like, I worked 3 months or like a month for Apple, it doesn't really look good for you. Just a heads up. Let's see if I share this, if it'll pop up. Are y'all still seeing the PowerPoint, or are you seeing a website?
I'm not seeing anything.
Let's stop sharing. How about now?
Yep.
All right. So this is one of Peter's portfolio pieces, and he can probably tell you more about it than I can. But it's really what stood out to me about his entire portfolio. So Peter had been working on a project where he couldn't really bring all the information forward. It was a government project, and so he redid his work in a way that focused on the Men in Black and kind of a workflow for them instead of the organization that he was working with. So we went through and redid the screens, talked about like the entire process, showed some good looking visuals connected to like the user bases around it, right? Went through the flows, and then eventually got to the application, which he redid to make sense in regards for an agent of Men in Black. So to me, it was something that was creative, a good way to show off his work, even though he was not allowed to, right? It was taking his work and bringing it to the side, and like it wasn't connected to the organization anymore. It was completely off to the side, and I think that's where it really stood out to me. It's like beyond the quality of the design, beyond the quality of like the presentation of his work, it was definitely innovative in the way that he was thinking about how to present it. All right. And so with that, talking about standing out. Like I mentioned a few times already, there's a ton of people that are applying for these jobs. UX is growing as an industry pretty heavily right now, and so even with a degree, even with like knowledge in design that maybe take you further than somebody with just like a boot camp information, right? Like a 10-week course, you've got to prove yourself. We've gotten a lot of quality people that have come through the boot camps that may not have like a full design education, that have just like really pushed through and shown off their work and their abilities, to prove themselves rather than just like winging it. So with that, I would recommend doing a couple things here. So like 5-10 minute tests. So I would have you, when you're done with your portfolio or you think you're in a good stopping place, share it with one of your colleagues or somebody that you know. Have them look at it for 5 minutes, right? And then ask them what stands out. Like, what do they remember about it? You can do surveys around this. You can just quickly talk to them and trade off. It just gives you a good idea of like what pieces they're holding on to. And then continue to explore and enhance your portfolio as you go. So there's a ton of great examples of good UX, as well as just like fun little things that will stand out to you across the web that people are doing to really to shine. So continuing to look at portfolios online of like other designers, but as well as going into just like different CSS tricks that are happening daily, right? There's a lot of things that you can take and basically convert to make it yours, to make it make sense around a project that will like make you push you a step further, um, and definitely expand your abilities and knowledge around an area where I highly recommend that you learn more about. It's just the development side. And then another thing is including skills and hobbies. So if you're doing this, definitely, I don't mind when people include a little bit about them. It's nice to connect to like a human being, right? And feel like there's a person behind this website. But make sure that it's connected to the overall message that you have. Don't just like share a collection of Pokemon cards at the end of it. Like even if there's something there, like to me, it is completely distracting from what the whole goal of this was. And if you're taking pictures or doing artwork on the side or whatever it is, make sure that it benefits you, right? If you're just starting off in some sort of field and just want to like have another place to post photos that you've taken of your dog, hold off. Use Instagram until like if you really think that it's quality enough to share and is showing off the abilities, like your abilities and whatever it may be, then include it. But I'll show you an example here in a sec. So there's two of them. Brigida is also another one of the designers on our team, and she has this one thing that like to me still stands out. And uh, so here's this one. So this is Brigida's portfolio. She had this noise distillery project, but really where to me it stood out was this concept that she had on here that I'd never seen before. So she was talking about basically the flow from going to wireframes to mock-ups, and she showed how she really did that here. And she had this like little piece that to me just like caught my eye so much. Is the idea that you can pull this out and here's your wireframes, right? And she went from that to this. It's like simple, but like it's memorable, right? And so that's really where you want to be, that memory side of things. Then let's see if I can. Just looking with me. Hopefully. Let me know if you can't see Tanya's work. But Tanya, another designer who couldn't join us today, she's an amazing illustrator, honestly. And when we started going through her portfolio, we went through her UX work and it was phenomenal. But I think this is really what pushed her over the edge is like all these hand-drawn like illustrations and sketches that she had done for a book. It really just brought like the detail and the attention that who she is as a designer showed here even more than it did anywhere else. And so it was really a huge benefit to her in that review. So that's kind of all I have from that standpoint. Figured I'd leave some time for questions from you all before we jump into the portfolio review.
I have a question, Dimitri. So you mentioned that we should show like at least 3 projects, like if we have that number of projects. Uh, my question is on the upper limit, like for like what about like people who have like 6 or 7 projects? Is it good to just show the best your best work only, or is it good to show a variety of work that you've done?
Yeah, I would make sure that if it's not good, then don't show it, right? I think that's a different scenario, but variety is good, right? So it's like showing just off your different skills and things that you've worked on, definitely quality. But if you need to come back and work on whether it's like the visuals of something, right? That tends to be what it is. You look at something and
Hmm.
it looks outdated at this point, where you maybe your design skills have updated, then you
Right.
can go around it that way, right? Like you can update how things look, and that's not bad. But as long as you're including like the honest truth about how you got to something, it's not a problem. Yeah,
Okay.
there's definitely an upper limit when it's like it becomes overwhelming, but it's the same way that you would design a website, right? Try not
Right.
to overboard people with like the number of things. It's things like Chipotle model, right? Like they have like how many like 17 ingredients that they just like use over and over. So like keep it simple, make it easy for people to make choices. Like what do I want to look at when I'm overwhelmed by like 30, 40 designs? I'm like, I guess I'm gonna click this one. So I think 10 is around the upper limit that I would see.
Got it.
Oh, I have a question. How do you feel about daily UI challenges? Like, how do you feel like whenever you see them?
I feel like I haven't seen a single person complete the entire 100-day challenge.
Yeah.
So I'd be really impressed if someone went through and did the whole 100 days. But I mean, it's good. It's gonna like push you a little bit and make you learn more. But I feel like a lot of times when people are working on it, they're really just doing the UI side of things. So you're looking for my UI challenge to do the UI work, then go for it.
Would you recommend like those type of things like on our portfolio? Like, would that count as like a project, I guess, or no?
It doesn't really have like a basis in anything to me, really. So like usually the challenge is just like build like a login, right? I think that's like the first one in that challenge.
Yeah.
And what you end up seeing is just like a bunch of posts on Dribble that are just like a login screen. It's something that you can host as like, here's like my daily UI challenges and what I worked on, but try to ground it in some sort of reality, right? So even if you don't do like the full 100, but if you take the idea of like a login screen or a checkout process and then go actually do a little bit of research on your own, show the initiative within that project, it'll push your portfolio a lot harder than like just like, oh, here's a picture of the login screen. A lot of it feels just copied and pasted when you see it that way.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple questions here in the chat window.
Yep. Why do you think that a US project that was part of a course is a limitation? Can you expand on that a little bit? Ola? So I wouldn't say it's a limitation. I think it was in your restriction. Gotcha. So I think a lot of times people find this as an area where they're basically thinking about like this was just like our project for class and it goes just this far, right? So I either just worked on the design of this or only on like the up to wireframes, right? It doesn't stop you from going further in this project and really thinking it all the way through and treating maybe your professor as like a client in this scenario, right? So try to frame it that makes more sense. That's really where I'm going more with it. Is it okay to use Behance instead of having your own portfolio site? Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing a lot more of that lately. It's just the same thing, right? When you're using one of these websites, like builders, just keep thinking about your users in them and how they'll go through it. So same thing with like the window, let them see what you're about to present to them. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It does limit your creativity a little bit, I'll tell you that. Oh, another thing on that same topic before I jump to this next question, with viewing. So I know this whole conversation is about presentation of portfolios, right? And everyone's thinking web and it's going to live online somewhere, which is definitely what you should be thinking. But make sure that if for any happenstance you're applying for a job, all you have is basically like a PDF version, or maybe like everything's in your, where make sure you have a way of getting this information to someone, even if you're posting a PDF online temporarily. We definitely had a few cases where people were hosting in like Google or in one of the other hosting locations that we just can't see as an organization. And so when we can't click on it, you have to send over a PDF, and if it's too big, then you have to break it up, and it has already ruined that entire thing, like entire presentation to me, right? Like I'm having to jump around and jump through hoops to see someone's presentation. It's definitely not ideal. How do you like to see student projects for clients identified? I know students shouldn't claim to be interns or employees for a company, but should they identify by the name of the course? Or, yeah, it could be by the name of the course, or at least just identifying there was like a class project that they had worked on. we've just seen cases where people have claimed that they've been there. So that's really where I got a bad taste in my mouth from that side. I think usually it's pretty clear, but if you note it at the top somewhere where you're giving a brief around that presentation, like, or that project, it's going to help you a lot. Would it be valuable to share projects that may not show an end-to-end process, but show a particular part of the process? For example, we learned how to build a component library for a hypothetical mobile app, but this app is not backed by research. That one's interesting, just because of where everything is from a component library perspective, from building a UI library. There's definitely going to be a lot that you're missing in that from like the hypothetical aspect of it, but at least the idea of like how you're using it. If it's something that you can apply to another project, I think it would get really interesting, because just the component library on itself without being applied to different places isn't as valuable. But if you can try to find a way to like maybe work on a series of things using that baseline library, it could be really beneficial to like you as a designer, as well as to applying to places, because like we have a UI library, most of the places now or have their own or using a standard one that you need to be able to work with.
Hey Dimitri, this is Arvind here. This question is something which is very, which may resonate with a lot of people, a lot of students here. So most of us are students, and the projects which we do as a part of our class projects or even internships which we do, we don't see the end value or the implementation of the projects which we do. So how do we talk about the value or the impact that we have created during our project or during the internship?
So is there something stopping from reaching out after like an internship or a project that you had worked on? Like I get some projects, they kind of just end, right? Like it's a class project, you've done as much as the semester required and it's over, right? But with an internship, I think the whole idea is to build some sort of connection with that group to hopefully bring
Right.
it back. So reaching back out to it shouldn't be a problem. Like if you're like, how did it go? What went wrong? I just want to know for my personal growth. It'll help you from that and for your portfolio. And it could be something that you're signifying, like, this is where I left and this is what ended up after I left and this was the result.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
This one's interesting too. So resume formatting, I've always had two different formats. So one that's just like really bland in Word that would go through that I could like copy and drop into places, and another that was done in InDesign that just like really was like your first glance at a person is that resume. Before I even open up a portfolio, I'll pull up their resume and see what it looks like. Go through it to see like how their alignment is, what typography they're using, just thinking about it from that perspective. If they're applying for like a more design role. If I see just like a really bland black and white one, it just feels like a missed opportunity. The process be. So from a granularity perspective, on each one of the projects, it's tough to say like it should be a page long or 2 pages long. All these projects are very different. And so even if you're using a lot more text to explain like the full end to end, give us highlights. Like when somebody's going to be looking at it, you really want to like look in and take down to the basics. And why I'm saying this is there's an understanding of when somebody can take and explain a process in a much shorter amount of words, they probably understand what they're doing a lot better than someone that takes like a much longer. Obviously, this isn't 100% of the case. Like, please don't be offended by it. But if you can minimize what you're doing, and I don't have to read like 4,000 words to get a gist of what's going on, it's going to benefit both of us. Mm-hmm.
Like the background music.
Yeah. I had to pay extra for that. All right. Sounds good. Any other questions about this?
Oh, lastly, so like, let's say like in your resume, let's say you don't have any like actual like intern experience. Would you put your projects on your resume, like to show like, hey, like I did this, or how would you go about doing that?
So some people include their projects on their resumes. I mean, your resume will change as you go. It's not going to be a bad thing if it's like if it's an internship. Definitely, if you're looking for filling up space, I can see it. I would just make sure that there's value in why you're including that specific project on there, right? Like if it's just another class that you took that everyone else had to take, it's not going to really help you stand out from the group. So I would just think about how else you can maybe bring your value to the world. There's a lot of people that need UX right now. So it's be a good time to think about it, right? With it would be a good learn about how to practice in that a lot of people may have not had before.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question, Dimitri. So, like in portfolios, like if you have some industry experience in terms of internship, how do you demonstrate like how we have collaborated with other team members, like whether it's like PMs or the engineers? Is it something that you look for in a portfolio?
No, that's something more that we do during interviews, that conversation. It's really hard to demonstrate that aspect in the portfolio. If you think of a good way, I want to see it for sure. Yeah, I think of a good way, unless you're doing process maps, right? Like showing off the integration between the groups. If you formatted something from like a strategic standpoint of pass off, seeing things like that that get interesting, but that's more of like operational flow, and it kind of like points to your thought of UX beyond just like the screen. It thinks about it just like the end-to-end process. But aside from that, I can't think of a way that I've seen it.
Hi, Dimitri. I'm Sharon. I have a question. So personal experience, I mean, this is not about portfolio in general, but about portfolio reviews. So personal experience, a lot of times when I'm like demonstrating my portfolio piece, I've been asked about my design rationale over certain features. And there have been occasions where I was like, that's a very good suggestion. I don't know why I didn't think about that. So how do you really tackle such questions? And how do you really answer them efficiently?
If someone thinks of something that you didn't think about,
Yeah, like the design rational question, like if someone gives a suggestion or someone say, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? So how do you really tackle such questions?
like a double word. There's definitely areas where like you really should have thought about it, and there's places where it's like or just more experienced that have seen things work and other things not. I mean, you can be honest and like explore that idea from them, right? Like if you want to ask them deeper level questions on why they're thinking that way and kind of flip it, it works too. Like kind of explore it together a little bit further. But yeah, I mean, there's no harm in thinking like saying like this is how we approached it instead. Like I went about it this way, and like this is what our result was, and that's why we ended up going that way. It doesn't mean there's not another option or maybe a better option out there, but there's like a reason behind what you're doing.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Then I think there's one in here too. You typically include a portfolio review during interview, and if so, do you just tell the students to start talking or do you ask questions? So over phone interviews, usually I'll have somebody just go through and kind of give me a background on themselves. There's a lot that you can find about the way that people are presenting this information, just like their thought process on like what information they want to show and share with you. And then, yeah, I usually pick a single piece to review and probe into like one project more than any others in a phone interview. I know we have a a longer interview process than most, just in person. So there's definitely people that ask about the portfolio pieces in person and dig into details into it, but it's usually more specific. There's questions that we want to get to.
So thank you very much, Dimitri, for answering all the questions. If like anyone has any question, we can take the last one and then we can move on to our next phase, which would be portfolio reviews. Okay. So what we're gonna do now is, so people who have already signed for the portfolio reviews, we are gonna divide you in 4 different breakout rooms, and in each room there would be a member from the Finra design team. For people who did not sign up for the portfolio review and want to take part, just stay on this main screen and we'll add you to a breakout room.